Okay, so we're going to have a look at some file input output. So let's create ourselves a new file. To open a file for writing, we use the open command. We then say the name of the file that we want to open. So I'm going to call it new1.txt. And then what we do is we say what mode we want to open it into, and I'm going to open it in the write mode. Now the write mode will open the file, and if it doesn't exist it will create the file. If the file already exists it will overwrite everything in that particular file. So that's our actual command to open the file, and when we call this command what it does is it gives us back a file handle. So it returns us something called the file handle. So I'm going to assign that to a variable called file handle. Then anything we want to do with the file, we do it through the file handle. So if I want to write to the file, I say file handle dot write, and I just want to write some text. So I'm just going to say this is line 1. So it's a bit like print in that respect. We're just going to put it in quotes, and going to do the same again. We're going to say this is line 2, and we're going to say the same again. This is line 3. And when we've finished with the file, we must always close the file. So we do file handle dot close. And just close the file. Just realise that those have somehow got a dot in, or is it mistyping with those? Because our variable is called file underscore handle. So that's the basics of opening a file for write mode. If the file exists already, it will overwrite everything in there, and if the file doesn't exist, it will create the new file. So let's just save our file first of all. Now what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put it into a new folder on the desktop called file.io, and I'm going to call it file. It's a Python file. Okay, so there's our program, and if we just go have a quick look at that folder where I've saved it, remember it was on my desktop. It was called file.io, and there it is. That's my Python file called file. So I'll run my program now. Okay. Oh, it ran, but it didn't show any output here on the shell. Is that wrong? Well, no, because we didn't tell it to print anything. But it certainly seems to have finished. If we go back to our folder now, we can see we've got a new text document here. If we double click, now I'm not going to double click, I'm going to right click on that. And I want to open with Notepad, okay, which is a text editor in Windows. So you can see it says this is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3. So the first thing to note is it's not put them on new lines, but that's quite weird, because when you look at your idle window, what did we actually do? We wrote it 3 times. Well, it's not like the print statement. The print statement automatically puts a new line character in when we do a print, but with a write, unless we tell it to write a new line, it won't actually write the new line statement. So that's why they're all on the same line. So this is what our file looks like. What's often also quite intuitive is to look at it with a program called hexedit. So that's not hexedit. I've just opened the wrong bit of program there. Let's go and find my hexedit, which I think I can do an open with hexedit from here. Oh yeah, open with hexedit. So install hexedit if you've not got it. It's a free bit of software, and this is a raw file editor, and it just opens the file and it shows you exactly the bytes that are in the file. So if you've not seen this before, these are obviously the ASCII codes written in hex of all the various characters. So a capital T is the hex value 54. If you want to know what the 20 is, highlight the 20 there, and you can see that's the space. Okay, and the crucial bit to show you this is when we get to the end here, line, E is our 65, then a space, then 31, which is the character 1, and then T. So you can see there's no characters in here for line spacing or anything, but that's what we asked our file to do. We just asked it to write the actual file. Let's get back to it in a minute if we find it. Okay, so if I want to actually print a new line in here, just like I could do in printing it, I can actually put the new line character in, which is a \n. So to make sure these are all printed on separate lines in the actual text file, I can put \n in it, I can run it. Now remember what we said, if the file exists, this will recreate it. Thing is, we've got it open with hexedit at the moment, so I'm going to close the hex editor, and we've got it open in Notepad, so I'm going to close that because they were both accessing that file. I'm going to rerun the file, and yes, it printed nothing again. That's what we expected. Now if I right click and open with, well, we'll open in hexedit. Okay, what you should see now is it's got these additional characters in here, OD and OA. Don't worry about the fact that these have physically appeared on different lines here. It's just because of the length of the text being 16 characters long. But you can see it's got this OD and OA. This is a carriage return and line feed commands that have now been inserted into this file. If we now go and open that same file in Notepad, you can now see that they've appeared on separate lines. Obviously within the file you don't see those OA and OD characters. Those are what move us on to the next line. Okay, so that's how we write a file, and you can see what we've done is we've used the write command. Because we've opened it in this particular write mode, we're just writing text to the file. If you write a number to the file, the number 100, it will be the characters 100, not the value 100. This is about writing characters, and we can easily therefore store data permanently in a file. And this is quite useful if you want to generate a file which the end user can read, because obviously our program has generated this file and we can just now come and open this in Notepad. We could open it in Word and things like that as well, and we can see this raw text. So that's what we use this type of output for. Okay, so that's the output side. Okay, so having had a look at writing data to a file, let's think about reading data from a file. So we'll keep this at the moment. We'll just put this off into a function. We'll just call it write data for now. Not passing any parameters, it's just doing everything within itself. I just want to keep. Oh, don't know what happened there. I just want to keep all the code together. So if I now want to read data from a file, basically the same, I'm just going to call this one read data. It's basically the same thing. I open the file first of all, so do a file handle. Obviously I can call this variable what I want. I've only got one file here, so I'm calling it file handle. If I had multiple files, then I would obviously put something that referred to a particular file. And I talk about the file now I want, which is going to be the same file. And this time, instead of doing a W for write, I do an R for read, because I want to read from the file this time. So I'm opening it in what's called the read mode. And how do I read data? Well, there's a number of different ways to do it. The simplest one we'll look at to start with is we obviously have to specify where we're reading from. So it's from the file handle again, and it's a method, so it's called read.read. The one I'm looking at the moment is called read lines. And this basically reads everything out of the file in one go. And we're going to allocate that to a variable called data. And then we're going to, just out of interest, because we're not sure what's going to happen now, we're going to print data to see what it actually extracts. And it'll also be interesting to print type of data, so we can see what type of data the read lines has handed us. After I've actually got that data out, I ought to close the file again. So close my file up. So I've already created the file new text.1, so this time I'm just going to read from the file. So def main, and in my main function at the moment I'm just going to do a read data and see what it does. Okay, so I'll run my program. Okay, so it read the data, ran that, and strange, it should have printed something out. Why did it not work? Come on, common error. Should have spotted it straight away. What did I forget to do? Yet again, I didn't call main. Whole load of functions, but nothing in main to actually make the whole thing run. So let's run it again. Okay, so this is what it's actually printed out. So it's a list, which we know is one of our collection types, because this is the type. And if you look at the list, it's actually got the 4 lines as separate elements within the list. So it's got the first line and then a comma, second line comma, third line comma, and it's got them in quotes because they're strings. So we know it's a list. It looks like a list. It's got square brackets around it. It's got the 3 items in our list separated by commas, and each one is text because it's in quotes. What you will notice though is because we printed it in this particular way, it's actually printed the \n in there for us. So it's not turned that character into a new line and actually forced it to be on a new line. Because we're printing these as a list, it's actually printed that \n for us. So remember, our lines have got \n in them. If we wanted to print them out one at a time, rather than printing data like this, because remember, data is a list. How do we iterate through a list? Well, I hope you remember, you just say for, put it in the right spacing, call it line in data. So this is going to get 1 line at a time, i.e. 1 element out, and I want to print the lines. Okay, so remember, data here is a list type. We've just shown that, so I don't actually need that statement anymore. Because it's a list, I can iterate through it. For line in data pulls it out 1 element at a time. We just saw data was made up of 3 elements, which are our 3 text strings. So this line will take on the variable of the first item, the second item, and the third, which are text strings, and it will print the strings for us. So let's run that. There we go. This is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3. So it looks like it's done what we want it to do. There's more astute amongst you may say, hang on a minute, it's done 2 new line characters, hasn't it? Because it's done a new line here at the end to get us onto the line below, and then another new line character down here. So why are the 2 new line characters? Well, the answer is one of them is actually read here in the data. We saw that when we just looked earlier on. Here it is. It's actually in the data we're printing. So that gets us our first new line. And because we're printing these, the print command, remember, has got a new line character on the end automatically anyway. So that's why we're getting 2 new lines. One is actually in the data, and the second one is because we're printing it. So it depends what you really want to do with this. It might be that you don't want to have that new line character on the end of the strings. Well, don't put them in the first place. Remember, when we created this file, we put the new line character in. But then it was nice to have the new line character in, because when we opened it in Notepad, we saw them all on separate lines. So maybe you do want them in. But now reading them back in to start doing them, you don't want that \n on the end. Well, if you don't want that \n on the end, you just need to get rid of it. So how could we get rid of those? Well, after we've read our data here, what we could do is we could go and actually alter each data item. So we could do for index in range. Now, because I'm going to alter them, I need to know where they are in my list this time. So I'm going to do 0 to len data. Okay, so I know that's going to go through, and I'm going to get an index value. I'm going to get an index value 0, 1 and 2, because I know my data items is 3 long. And what am I going to do in this case? I'm going to rewrite the data item. So data brackets index, so I'll get them one at a time, equals data brackets index. So data brackets index is my string, and I want to slice the string up, and I want to go from 2 before the end, sorry, from 0, i.e. the start of the string, to 2 before the end of the string, which will get rid of the last 2 items, so not 2 minus, but minus 2. Minus 2. So just reiterating what this has done, it's reiterating, that was almost a pun if you're into Python jokes. We're iterating through this range statement, which we know len data in our case is going to be 3, so 0 to 3, so it'll do 0, 1 and 2, so the value index will take on 0, 1 and 2. So initially we're doing data 0, i.e. the first element from our list is data 0 sliced from the beginning to 2 minus 2 before the end, which should chop off the last few characters, and then we're going to have a go at printing it. So let's run that and see if that happens. Just out of interest, we just so we can see it in action, what we'll do here is we'll just print data. So that's as we've read it out of the file, and then after we've sliced it, we'll just print it again just to see what's going on, and then we'll actually do it a line at a time. Let's run that. Invalid syntax, I've missed something out. Oh, got a bracket missing there. Okay, so this is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3. We've stripped it out. Now I've obviously made a mistake here. I thought that when we read the file it was going to read the OD and the OA characters together. It obviously hasn't. It's only read one character at the end of that. It's only picked up the OA, the first one I think, the OA. So where we stripped this off, I stripped 2 characters back from the end, so I've actually lost the numbering as well. So I didn't need to go from 2 to the end, I actually needed to go 1 to the end. I'll just rerun that. There we go. This is line 1, this is line 2, and this is line 3. So now we've stripped these return characters off the end, and when we're printing them, this is just that string without the return on, but they're on separate lines because we printed them with 3 separate print statements. Okay, so that gives you the idea of reading and writing files. Bear in mind that as you create files within an editor, so obviously in this case we got the program to create the text file and then we read it back in. It was very tightly controlled what that text file looked like. Just recall it from memory, just have a quick look at it again. Open with hexedit. You can see here it had put this OD and OA in because we put that as a print statement in there. If you create a text file, it might not have exactly the same syntax in, and that's why hexedit is quite a useful program. If you're creating your own text files, what you need to do is make sure, let's just find Notepad. Oh, there's our Notepad. So if we create a text file, so I'm actually a new one. This is a new file. Several lines in. So if you create it, now this is in Notepad, when we come to do file save as, just notice you've got, okay, so Notepad is quite good, it's just a .txt, but you've got different encoding options here, ANSI, Unicode. Depending on what you put, it will code those letters differently. The one we're interested in is ANSI in this particular case. If we do UTF-8, it's similar to ANSI, but you'll see there's some extra bytes in there. So make sure it's ANSI. If you're using a different editor, say you're doing it in Word and you save it as a .txt, again it might do things slightly differently. You might not have all these coding options available. So we'll save this in ANSI. It's not letting us save it because I've got it open in hexedit as well. Okay, so I've just saved it there. Let's go back into idle and run our program and see what it does. Yeah, this is a new file with several lines in, and here's the last line. Misspelled. Let's check it didn't actually chop it off. Ah, there's an interesting one. So it did have the E in. It's a very good point actually. It did have the E in, but it's chopped the E off. Why has it chopped the E off? Because I'd left my cursor there and it's not actually got a carriage return on the end of that line. So that line actually ends on the E. So we chop the E off. If I now hit return and save it, okay, my cursor's down there, so I do have a carriage return on there, and rerun my program. There it is, now back with the E on, because there was a carriage return which we then stripped off. So our bit of code here, stripping carriage returns off, was a bit harsh. Maybe it should have checked that it was a carriage return before it actually, or a line feed rather, an OA, before it actually stripped it off. And then we wouldn't have had that problem. It just shows you some of the complexities that can occur if you've just not got your wits about you when you're writing text files and reading text files in Python. Okay, so hopefully that was a brief intro to that, and you feel quite confident now creating text files, reading data in and writing data out. Very last point to note that I've just realized I've completely forgot is, where is the file saved? Well, that was why I created it in a separate folder called file.io. Wherever you run your Python file, if you just make reference to a file directly, it'll do it in the same directory your Python file is in. So relative to where you are, it's in the same directory. If you want it somewhere else, then you need to specify the path, either a full path starting with a C drive or a relative path starting from where you are. Okay, thanks very much. Hope that was useful. Bye.